A Haunting in Arkansas, the true story of the Shea family. Before you go to bed tonight, hit that subscribe button, because after this story you may never sleep the same again. The Shea family moved to the countryside of Benton, Arkansas, in the fall of 2016. The house was old, built in the late 1940s, standing alone at the end of a narrow dirt road surrounded by tall pine trees that swayed even when there was no wind. It was the kind of house that looked peaceful in daylight but changed its face when the sun went down. For Ryan Shea, a construction worker, and his wife Melissa, a schoolteacher, it was their dream home. Quiet, affordable, and big enough for their two kids, Noah and Lily. The neighbors were few, the nights silent. It seemed perfect, until the first night. Melissa was unpacking boxes in the kitchen when she heard footsteps upstairs. She called out for Ryan, no answer. She went up, only to find both kids asleep and Ryan fixing a light in the hallway. He hadn't been in the rooms above her. That was the first moment the house made her uneasy. The next morning things started going missing. A mug. A picture frame. Ryan brushed it off, saying it must have been lost during the move. But when Melissa found the missing mug placed perfectly in the middle of their front porch 2 days later, cold and filled with rainwater, she felt her stomach twist. At night, Noah began to complain about whispers. "They're calling my name," he said one evening. From the vent. Ryan laughed it off, but when Melissa went to check, she heard something faint, a soft, breathy sound, almost like someone repeating a name she couldn't understand. Days later, strange smells filled the house, like wet dirt and something burning. Lights flickered even after the power company checked the lines. The dog, Daisy, barked endlessly at a dark corner near the living room wall. Then came the night Ryan found the crawl space. He had gone down to the basement to fix a leaking pipe. Behind a stack of wooden crates, he saw a panel that didn't match the wall. It looked like it had been nailed shut long ago. With a hammer and flashlight, he pried it open. The air that rushed out was cold and foul, like something that had been sealed away for years. Inside was a small space no bigger than a closet. On the dirt floor sat a rusted metal box, half buried. Ryan opened it. Inside were children's toys, a small doll, a red truck, a faded photo of a woman and a little girl, and something else. A piece of cloth covered in dark stains. When he showed Melissa, she froze. "We should call someone," she whispered. But Ryan didn't. He tossed the box aside, saying it was just junk from the previous owners. That night, their house groaned like it was alive. Around midnight, Melissa woke up to the sound of someone crying softly. It wasn't the kids. The voice came from the hallway. When she opened the door, the air was freezing. A shadow moved past her, small like a child. She followed it down the hall, her heart pounding, until she reached Noah's room. He was sitting upright in bed, staring at the corner. "She's here again," he said in a shaky voice. "The lady in the wall." Melissa turned on the light. Nothing. Just the wall. But faintly, very faintly, she saw handprints, small and smeared, across the wallpaper. Ryan tore down that section of wall the next morning, convinced it was a prank or some leftover paint marks. Behind the wallpaper, the wood was scratched. Deep lines that looked like fingernail marks carved into the grain. That was when he stopped laughing. From that day, the whispers grew louder. The smell stronger. And the house, their dream home, started to feel like a trap. Because what the Shees didn't know yet was that the woman in the photo Ryan had found had once lived there. And she never left. The mornings in the Shea house were no longer peaceful. Every day began with something new out of place. The kitchen chairs turned around, picture frames faced backward, and sometimes the front door was left wide open even though Ryan locked it before bed. Melissa barely slept. She started keeping the hallway light on at night, but that didn't stop the sounds. Tapping. Whispering. And sometimes, slow footsteps moving from room to room when everyone was in bed. Ryan tried to be the strong one. He told Melissa she was just tired and the kid's imagination was running wild. But deep down he knew something was wrong. One morning when he was about to leave for work, he found small muddy footprints on the stairs. Too small to be his, but too big to belong to Lily. He cleaned them up quietly. He didn't tell Melissa. A week later, Melissa called a local historian after finding a faint name written behind the wallpaper. Anna Shea, 1952. The historian, Mrs. Daly, was an elderly woman from the local library. When she arrived, she stared at the name for a long time before speaking. "This house belonged to the Shea family in the 1950s, she said softly. A husband, wife, and their little girl, Anna. The husband disappeared one night. They found his truck in the woods, but not him. A few months later, the wife and daughter went missing too. The house sat empty for years." Melissa froze. "Wait, Shea, you mean?" Yes, Mrs. Daly nodded. Same last name as yours. Strange, isn't it? That night, Melissa told Ryan everything. For the first time, he didn't try to argue. They both decided to search the basement again. With flashlights in hand, they went down after putting the kids to bed. The air was damp and heavy. The old crawl space Ryan had opened days ago looked darker now, almost like it had sunk deeper. Melissa crouched down, sweeping her light across the dirt. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. Ryan listened, faint crying echoed from inside the wall. He moved closer, pressing his ear against the wood. Suddenly, the crying stopped and something knocked back, 3 times. Ryan stumbled backward, his flashlight flickering. "There's someone in there," he said. They called the sheriff's office the next morning. 2 deputies came, checked the basement, and said there was nothing but old air vents and mouse tunnels. They left after 20 minutes, thinking it was just another case of small-town nerves. That same night, Noah started screaming in his sleep. Melissa ran into his room and found him pointing at the corner again. "She said her name is Anna," he cried. "She said we took her house." The next day, Melissa packed a bag for the kids and said she was leaving to stay with her sister. But Ryan refused. He said leaving wouldn't solve anything, it would only make the house win. He stayed behind that night, alone. Around midnight, he heard movement in the hallway. Thinking it was the kids, he called out their names. No response. The sound grew louder, footsteps dragging slowly across the wooden floor. Ryan grabbed a flashlight and walked toward the sound. The air grew colder with each step. When he reached the end of the hall, he saw the basement door slightly open. He knew he had locked it earlier. As he approached, the door swung wide on its own. The light from his flashlight trembled as he aimed it down the steps. For a moment there was nothing. Then, out of the darkness, he saw her. A pale figure standing halfway down the stairs. Her dress was old, torn, soaked with mud. Her head tilted slightly to the side and her eyes, dark, hollow, stared straight at him. Ryan froze. "Who are you?" he whispered. The woman's lips parted slowly. "Anna?" The light flickered. The air turned icy. Then she was gone. Ryan dropped the flashlight and ran. But when he reached the living room, he stopped dead in his tracks. Every picture frame in the house had fallen face down. And on the wall above the fireplace, written in what looked like dirt or ash, were the words, "Welcome home." The next morning, Ryan didn't go to work. He just sat at the kitchen table, staring at the words still faintly visible on the wall. "Welcome home." He hadn't told Melissa what happened, afraid she'd never come back. But the house felt different now, heavier, like it was breathing. By afternoon, Melissa called to check on him. Her voice trembled through the phone. "Ryan, I had a dream last night. About a little girl crying under the floor." Ryan went silent. His eyes drifted toward the basement door. "Maybe it's time to end this," he said. "Maybe she's trying to tell us something." Melissa didn't want him to go down there again, but by nightfall he did. He carried a shovel, a flashlight, and his phone camera on record, just in case. The air in the basement was so cold his breath came out like smoke. Every sound, every creak felt alive. He pointed the light at the dirt floor and saw the faint outline of the crawl space again. But now, something else caught his eye. The dirt was uneven, like it had been disturbed recently. He knelt and began to dig. At first it was just soil. Then the smell hit him, damp and metallic. A few inches deeper, his shovel hit something solid. What? He cleared more dirt, revealing an old wooden box, larger than the first one he'd found. He hesitated, then opened it. Inside were bones, small ones, wrapped in a faded floral cloth. Beside them lay a locket. Inside the locket was a tiny photo, the same woman and little girl from before. The one from the picture he'd thrown away. Suddenly, the basement light flickered. The air went silent. The house above creaked as if someone was walking across the floorboards. "Melissa?" he called out, though he knew she wasn't there. When he turned, the figure of the woman stood behind him again, closer this time. The same hollow eyes, the same twisted dress. But now she was crying. "Why are you here?" Ryan whispered. Her voice was barely a breath. "He buried us here." Then she pointed toward the far corner of the basement. Ryan aimed his flashlight there. The beam revealed another patch of disturbed earth. He dropped to his knees and dug frantically. Within minutes, he uncovered something larger. A skeleton, clearly adult, still wearing a rusted wedding ring. Was the husband. In that moment, everything became clear. The woman and child had been murdered, hidden beneath the floor by the man who was supposed to love them. And for decades, their spirits had been trapped in silence, waiting for someone to uncover the truth. As Ryan whispered, "I'm sorry," the light went out completely. He felt a cold hand touch his shoulder, gentle, almost thankful. The basement filled with soft whispers, then quiet. The air warmed slightly, and for the first time since they moved in, the silence felt peaceful. When Melissa returned the next morning, she found the basement door wide open. Ryan was sitting at the bottom of the stairs, pale and quiet, staring at the floor. The police arrived hours later and carefully removed what they found: the remains of the woman, the child, and the man. The story spread quickly through Benton. The Shea family's new home was now a crime scene linked to a 70-year-old murder. After the discovery, the hauntings stopped. No more whispers. No more cold air. The house became still again. But Ryan never stayed there another night. The family sold the property and moved away. A few months later, the new owners, an older couple, began renovations. While repainting the living room, they found something carved faintly into the wooden wall beneath the wallpaper. It said, "Thank you, Ryan. We can rest now." And though the story of the Shea family's haunting became one of Arkansas's most whispered legends, those who live nearby say sometimes, on cold, quiet nights, you can still hear a little girl laughing softly through the trees. Not crying, just free.